Hello, students of P-Tech. I had you watch a video yesterday that I actually use in my anatomy class, going over the basics of the nervous system. Um, this is actually the presentation I did for you, including the doodle notes that you will get. I'm going to go through some of them that are kind of review of what you learned, so make sure, hopefully you have notes on the parts of the nervous system. We are doing this with the goal of that your end product for this your project is going to be that you're going to pick a disease or a drug or something related to the brain and synapses, and you're going to discuss what happens to synapses and to the brain. I have a full description for you, but that's what this is leading to. So you're going to be working on that. There's going to be a week, January, I'm trying to think the week, I think 2 weeks from now, where I'll be gone, and you'll be working on that project during that time. So what I'm going to do is go through some of this. I'll tell you what's important that you really understand that you need to write down, but most of this, all of this, will be in doodle notes that you will get, okay, that you will get when we get back. All right, so the nervous system, I talked about this the other day in the video. Sensory information is going to go in. That's what the nervous system does. It carries information in, so think of the senses. Then your brain and your spinal cord will do the integration of that information. So all this input's coming in. Think of the brain and your spinal cord as the brain that will integrate all that. And then your brain or your spinal cord will send a response out, and that is motor. Okay, that's the motor. So sensory is bringing it in, motor is bringing it out. Your brain and spinal cord are doing the integration or the computer work per se. This is just a feedback loop. I'll talk about this. I don't want to go into this now. This is what you already did. So your central nervous system, your brain and spinal cord, peripheral nervous system is your nerves, sensory, motor. You can look at this, but again, you'll see this later. Somatic, motor neurons control muscle. Autonomic motor neurons control the parts of your body you don't want to have to think about. And then you've got the parasympathetic and sympathetic. The sympathetic is the fight or flight response. Parasympathetic is rest and digest. So what you're going to think about with the drug or disease, you may see differences in parasympathetic or sympathetic response depending on what you choose to do your project over. All right, so what I want to focus on today is what are neurons and what are neural glial cells. So most of you know nerve cells. You heard the term nerve cell. A neuron is the functional unit of your nervous system. It is the main cell that is going to conduct electricity and send the impulses to and from your brain and spinal cord. And they will also in your brain send signals throughout the brain. Okay, so this whole process of input and output and integration is done by neurons. But there are other cells called neuroglial cells, and I want you to be aware of these because these are the helper cells, and these actually outnumber the neurons in your brain by like 4 to 1 or 10 to 1, I think, somewhere from 4 to 10 to 1. Doesn't matter the number, but they outnumber your neurons by a lot. And in the past, we have looked at diseases like Alzheimer's and schizophrenia and depression, and we've always looked at, or scientists have looked at, what is happening to the neurons to cause these disorders. And what we found is we can't come up with answers. We've been researching Alzheimer's forever. Not forever, but for a long time. And 20 years ago, I had a friend whose mother had Alzheimer's, and I actually was renting from them. And our thinking was, well, in 20 years, then we were told, oh, they'll have a cure, they'll know what causes it. And it's 20 years later and we don't. And part of that is because we may not be looking at the cells that are actually causing the issue. And that may be the neuroglial cells. I bring those up because when you do some reading and research on whatever your topic's going to be, they may talk about these cells. Examples will include things called astrocytes or microglia cells, or Schwann cells, or oligodendrocytes. They always remind me of a macaroni, but oligodendrocytes. So I want to bring those up because as you talk about certain disorders, you may see those cells talked about. Okay, so neurons take information in, the central nervous system, brain or spinal cord integrate, and then a motor neuron is going to take them out. So that's kind of basic what we've talked about before. Okay, this is where I really want to focus today. Today's discussion is going to be on the anatomy of a neuron. So a neuron looks nothing like any other cell I've showed you. It's very, very unique. Know that this is a part of a previous neuron, and this is a part of the next neuron. And what's going to happen in simple terms is an electrical signal is going to be transmitted from this end of the neuron to this end of the neuron. And then what's going to happen to converse with the next neuron, there's a gap here called a synapse. And that gap has to be overcome, and it's overcome by what is called a neurotransmitter. A neurotransmitter is a chemical that is going to be released from the end of this neuron, and then it's going to bind to this next neuron and cause either this cell to fire or to not fire. It can either excite the next cell or it can inhibit the next cell. And the same thing would happen here. How does this neuron get excited? Or how does it slow down? It does that because of the neuron previous to it. So the electrical signal will come down here, be released, neurotransmitters will be released, and then bind to this part of the neuron. And then those neurotransmitters will either excite or they will shut down this neuron. So an electrical signal goes down a neuron, but from one neuron to the next neuron is a chemical signal. And I'll get more into that specifics in tomorrow's video. Or if we're in school, then I will just go over it with you. But let's go through the parts of a neuron. These are the dendrites. Okay, notice the color coding here. These are the dendrites. These are the parts of the neuron that are going to be getting information from other neurons. So there could be a neuron here that's going to influence this neuron. There could be another neuron here that's influencing this neuron. So these are going to get the chemical signals from other neurons. If the neuron is excited, then that impulse will be transmitted to the nucleus of the cell. So just like any other cell, it has a nucleus, and it's located in the cell body, which is right here. So the nucleus is in the cell body. And then what you see in a neuron, which is different, very different from other cells, is this long, long extension. This long extension is called an axon. And this is where the electrical signal, when enough excitatory neurotransmitters have been transmitted to this cell, then an electrical signal will travel, it's called an action potential, will travel all the way down the neuron, down the axon, and then the axon will end in what is called the axon terminals, okay, the axon terminals, where the chemicals will be released. Now you'll notice around the axon are these little, I don't even know what they look like on here, they look like kind of marshmallows, but that is called myelin sheath. Okay, that is called myelin sheath, and it's wrapped around the axon. And what those do, first of all, they are made of a Schwann cell, which is one of the neuroglial cells that I talked about. They are Schwann cells that are wrapped around the axon. They allow that electrical signal to travel very, very quickly, much faster than it would without the myelin sheath. And there's gaps here between the Schwann cells, and those are called the nodes of Ranvier. So what will happen is, if chemicals excite this neuron, the electrical signal will travel down the axon. But when you have myelin sheath, the electrical signal will actually jump from node to node and get down there much, much faster. Okay? So that is the basics of a neuron. The dendrites will respond to the chemicals, and if they are excited enough, they will send a signal through the nucleus, will then transmit that signal electrically down the axon to the axon terminals. When the electrical signal gets down to the axon terminals, they will release neurotransmitters which either can excite or inhibit the next neuron. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to draw a picture of a neuron, get these parts in there, make sure you know what each of these parts do, And then tomorrow, depending on whether we're in school or not, I'm going to spend a lot of time going over what happens at the synapses. Because when you look at drugs and disorders, whether they're legal drugs or illegal drugs, what they do is they affect the synapses. So when someone gets a high from a drug, it's because of a change in a synapse. When someone becomes addicted to a drug, it's because synapses have been changed. When someone has a craving for a drug, whether it's nicotine or whether it's meth or whether it's caffeine, and obviously those are a wide range of addictions. It's because of changes in the synapse. So we will spend our time talking about that. Like I said, either I will go over it with you in class or I will do a video for you for the next day. So for today, I'm not going to give you a quiz. All I want you to do is please watch this video because I will expect that you know it, that you will know it when we come back. If we're out of school Wednesday, then there will be a quiz and it will have some of this material over it. All right, you guys have a great day. I hope you get out in the snow or you had a chance to get out in the snow. I know each day I've gone for a walk, and then I've been spending my days when I'm not working. I've been spending it watching my cats watch the birds eat the food that I've put out for them. So you guys have a wonderful day.